Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Elhamdülillahi Rabbil alemin. Vessalatu vesselamu ala Rasulina Muhammedin ve ala alihi ve ashabi ecmain. Our speaker today is Ibrahim Özdemir, Professor of Philosophy, and at the same time, he is the chairman of the Department of Philosophy at Üsküdar University. Dr. Ibrahim received his PhD degree in philosophy from Middle East Technical University, and also his bachelor's degree in Islamic studies, more particularly Islamic philosophy, from Ankara University. Both are in Turkey, as you know. Now, he taught at various universities in the meantime, sometimes visiting professor and so on. And then he served, more importantly, as the founding president of Hasan Kalyoncu University. So he established this university in Gaziantep, that's southwestern Turkey, near Syria, very close to Syria. And Dr. Özdemir's areas of interest consist primarily in environmental ethics and environmental philosophy. That is extremely important, as you know today. However, he's a journalist. He has a general approach with a wide variety of scholarly and pedagogical interests that include ethics, history of philosophy, modern philosophy, philosophy of education, and philosophy of higher education also, as he also served in the Department of Department of Education as Director General. His most recent publications include The Ethical Dimension of Human Attitude Towards Nature, and also Jalaluddin Rumi and Confucius, Messages and Visions for a New Century. And this is also in environmental philosophy and ethics. And then a general book that he co-edited with Ian Markham on globalization, ethics, and Islam. That is the title, the general title. And in August 2015, he was part of the drafting team of the Islamic Declaration for Global Climate Change. This is very important. And then also he served as a consultant in the United Nations Environmental Program in New York. And presently he has been working on Islamic Charter on the Environment with a team of scholars, again, under the same umbrella, namely UN Environmental Program. So I am pleased to present today Dr. Ibrahim to talk on critical and creative thinking as pillars of an Islamic education. As you know, this is a big problem, especially in the Muslim world. As far as I remember, one time, Aliya İzzet Begovic, rahmatullahi alayhi, he said, if it were in his powers, he would make a mandatory course throughout the Muslim world on critical thinking. So this is what, inshallah, we will be discussing.
Okay, thank you, Hocam. It's a pleasure for me to be with you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. It is really an honor for me to be your guest today to deliver this talk. In fact, it is a working paper. It's gonna be a chapter for a book which will be published in the UK. And I just want to share the main, the main arguments with you. Maybe I get feedbacks from you. I am glad at Muaz also is joining this panel. As far as I know, his recent book is on critical thinking in Islam. But unfortunately, I couldn't get the book. I'm still waiting. Next month, a friend of mine will come from Chicago. She will bring the book for me. Then I hope I also consult Ed's book before I send the final draft. So all your contribution is welcome. You know, the title is The Critical and Creative Thinking as a Pillars of an Islamic Education, because, As founding president of a university and also working for Ministry of Education for 7 years, and also my extensive visits and travels in the Muslim countries from Morocco to Jakarta, you know, teach me a lesson that the major problem of Muslim societies is rely in education system. Therefore, this study will discuss the role of critical and creative thinking in preparing students to respond to the challenges that threaten our societies and the globe as a whole. As we have been living in an ever interconnected and changing globalized world, an ideal education must address problems such as global warming, international terrorism, migration, pandemic, diseases, poverty, injustices, which are jeopardizing the security of the global community. If we want today's students to come with new solutions and alternatives to solve these challenges, we must prepare them with the ability to open their minds and sharpen their thinking. As you know, I think I am the first one in Turkey who devised a course on critical thinking at Üsküdar University 5 years ago. And in my first class, I make a quiz, you know, I just make, you know, a quiz with students, you know, just to breaking the ice and to socialize them. And I am surprised, I just ask them their own personal view on some very easy issues, you know. What do you think about that? And it just, you know, I am disappointed every time there are few students that say, I don't have any opinion, sir. When I said, why? And the reply is almost the same every year, because nobody asked my personal view, you know, in my life. And sometimes it is their parents, sometimes from the family, they are deciding for them. So how these students, if they got the, you know, their diploma, how they will contribute to solve, how they can be expected to solve our problems. So it will suggest that the classical Muslim legacy, it was not difficult to see the flames and the spirit of critical thinking kindled by the very teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. This is one of my propositions. The spirit of the critical thinking is kindled by the Quran, and it's exemplified in the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And therefore, this paper therefore will attempt to define concepts, creative thinking first, and then delineate the major features of critical and creative thinking in the Quranic worldview, and provide some example from Islamic philosophy, which I chose for this paper the Ghazali as an example, because I think Ghazali is as a good example about both creative and also critical thinking. So let me, you know, as I pointed, you know, earlier, we have been living in a world of accelerating change, intensifying complexity, and increasing interdependence. And as a Chinese proverb says, in interesting times. Accordingly, the problem of education, as well as many others that are challenging and even threatening ourselves, our countries, and humanity as a whole, are highly complex, increasingly interdependent, and multifaceted. Therefore, it cannot be solved with an education system designed for a different epoch by once popular nation-state narrow mentality, which shaped our identity, mentality, institutions, and values in the first part of the 20th century, and with minor changes, it is still with us. This is one of my second propositions, which is, you know, the major problems regarding education, let's forget others, in the Muslim society is a product of nation-state mentality. Still, it is, again, you know, it is still not compromising for the change. This is many, you know, domestic problems and tension in the Muslim societies as a result of this nation state mentality because they don't want to change. In any critiques about to ask some questions to understand the foundation of this mentality, you can easily be blamed, and also you got have problems with the state as being a globalist or working for another country. Therefore, it is very, very important to understand what nation state mentality is and the impact of this mentality on our own perception of ourselves and our societies and also other humans. As a result of this legacy, young people also find it difficult to assert their place in society, even they are strongly attached to the sacred values of their religion. Therefore, students educated with this mindset could not produce any creative and constructive responses to the challenges of globalization for them and their own countries. In fact, what is needed today is a richer version of humanity, human ability and creativity, which are of fundamental importance in the lives of our children, students, and even humanity at large as we live in a global village. I was living in Finland for 2 years, and I can observe Muslim students, from Morocco, from Algeria, from Egypt, from Turkey, from Southeast Asia, But when it comes to critical thinking, almost they have the same mentality. They don't have self-confidence if they can make any contribution to any problems. If their view will be appreciated if they express themselves in some panels, in some classrooms, in some platforms. They don't have self-confidence that what they will say, it is important. They just scared. They just look around themselves. Then when I ask them, or somebody asks them, what do you think Ahmed? What do you think Muhammad? They say, Astaghfirullah, sir, it's okay for me, etc. It is very rare to have some critical spirits. And it is, therefore, this is not only a problem for this country, and this country is a problem of Muslim society. I will suggest that one solution may be revising our curricula and teaching creative and critical thinking and redesign education curricula on the ideals of the Quranic value system. And here, the Quranic value system, in my paper also, I went as far as to the Maqasid al-Sharia. What was the Maqasid al-Sharia? What was, as Said Nursi says, what was Maqasid al-Quran? We cannot design or develop or change our curricula or education system just with the market mentality, finding a job on the market. Of course, this is important, but it is not sufficient for an education system to be called in Islamic. Franz Rosenthal, this is, I thank my Professor Alparslan, and he said, Alparslan said, how I introduce you, Ibrahim. I said, don't make a long introduction, just say Ibrahim is my student is enough, but he didn't say, I don't know why. And he was just, when I was, doing my master's degree with Alparslan Hoca, he recommended us the importance of Franz Rosenthal's book, The Triumph of Knowledge. Rosenthal, after comprehensive and penetrating studies on the classical period of Islam, articulates how the spirit of burning for knowledge become the central leitmotif of all Islamic civilization. I don't want to go in length, but it will suffice, during the worst days of the Second World War, Franz Rosenthal was working on the manuscripts in Süleymaniye manuscript library, in Istanbul libraries, on the manuscripts he was gathering materials for his book. So, there is no single book, I think, better than Rosenthal's book, who, make it very clear about the central role of knowledge in Islamic civilization, based on, of course, Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. And examples of these ideals can be seen in the scripture, in the Quran itself, and in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, who was a role model for the scholars and scientists of classical Islam, such as Kindi, Farabi, Ibn Sina, Ibn Haytham, but last not least Ghazali. And this paper proposes that these ideals were lost, especially after 14th century, for a couple of reasons, which I will not deal with here. What is obvious is the fact that, as Rosenthal also observed, when Muslims lost this spirit of burning for learning, for ilm, that it was insights that is new insights into the scriptures as well as into the book of the universe. They also lost their economic, political independence and had to live under colonial rules. You see, this is, I think there's a lot of explanation and also, facts about this in Alparslan Hoca's book about, Islamic scientific tradition Islam. On the other hand, this work is a result of my personal journeys, as I said earlier, and observation during 7 years of experience as Director General at the Ministry of National Education in Turkey, and my extensive travels from Morocco to Indonesia. Wherever I went, I visited schools, universities, and tried to talk with teachers, students, parents, and policymakers on the quality of and problems of education. Just 3 years before the Arab Spring, I was sitting at the Tahrir Square in Cairo and talking with the young Egyptians students, who some of them were studying at American University, some of them the Cairo University and others. And when I just try to understand their vision about the future, and a clever student, very smart student, answered me, sir, I don't know what I gonna to have for breakfast tomorrow. What future we are talking about? You see, he said, I am now almost 27 or 26 years old, and this our president is still there, and nothing is changing. So I discover the young people I am talking with, that they don't have hope for the better future, and they don't have a self-confidence that they can make a change. And then it is down upon me. It is all a result of education they are getting from the official education, from their schools, from their teachers. So to observe that Muslim societies still live in a world marked by widespread illiteracy, outdated curricula, underdevelopment, dropouts, and poverty were disappointing and even heartbreaking for me. Because I also attended for 7 years, I was attending the OECD meetings and conferences, panels on education on behalf of the Turkish government. The plight of the Muslim countries was just heartbreaking. So it was not difficult to observe that the plight of education and the underdevelopment in many Muslim societies were results of outdated curriculum, quality of teachers, and learning material, but also a mindset which lacks a desire for novelty and innovation to solve the problems they encounter in their daily life. Moreover, there is a lack of a solid and comprehensive philosophy of education to motivate and shape the process of education. One rare exception is Naqib al-Attas from Malaysia. When he attended the first Islamic conference on education by Saudi Arabia in 1977, he raised these questions, and there was a lot of objection to him, because according to some classical minded ulamas, everything was in the past, in our legacy, everything was there. We just have to take them from the past and bring to today. But what Naqib al-Attas was saying, it was very, very different. He was emphasizing and underlying the importance of the Quranic value system, and how Quran the Quranic concept of human being, the Quranic concept of the world. So I also, in my paper, I just also underlined the contribution of Attas. And also in this process, also Alparslan Açıkgenç Hocam has a very good article on the subject. I also consulted his article too. But then, when I proposed this chapter for the book, the editor told me, we are scared of creative and critical thinking because it has a very negative, understanding in the public. But I told him I will use, creative and critical thinking in a creative way. So, as you know, there are more than one definition in the literature on what creative and critical thinking means. It is not surprising to see a common stereotype regarding critical thinking that it aims to find fault and discrepancies of others or to develop arguments to accuse and undermine someone. And this is why the critical thinking is misunderstood or there are a lot of stereotypes about this. Sometimes it is legitimate because it is used in a very negative way to criticize the authenticity of the tradition, or even in the Quran, or some lot of problems in the name of critical thinking. There was a lot of attacks on the Islamic values or Islamic issues. So, but here I use it in a different way. Here, we will prefer using the definition we choose in two primary academic disciplines, that is philosophy and psychology. As these separate academic strands have developed different approaches to defining creative and critical thinking that reflect their respective concerns. And both terms has been used interchangeably, although there are some differences between two terms. That is, whereas the creative thinking is divergent, critical thinking is convergent. Whereas creative thinking tries to create something new, critical thinking seeks to assess worth and validity in something that exists. Whereas the creative thinking is carried on by violating accepted principles, critical thinking is carried on by applying accepted principles. But with this in mind, when we look at the history of philosophy, it is difficult to reach a consensus on a definition of what philosophers understood by critical. However, the American Philosophical Association's consensus portrait of the ideal critical thinker is very meaningful and important for our case here, as it describes a critical thinker, someone who is inquisitive in nature, open-minded, flexible, fair-minded, has a desire to understands diverse viewpoints, and it is willing to both suspend judgment and to consider the other perspective. As I summarized, my major paper for here, just to 10 pages. Therefore, I think I just now realize there are some discrepancies, or maybe some, disappeared some sentences, but don't worry about that. So one of the third assumptions of this paper is that, it is the education in Islam is somehow is related to nurturing God-given potentialities. There is, from Aristotle, there are many philosophers, they are emphasized and underlined on human being is born to learn. It is need to learn by nature. But it is in the Quran, it is emphasized that we have God-given potentialities. Said Nursi bases his anthropology, for example, on the Quranic basis, and argues that man has been created on the most excellent of patterns and has been given most comprehensive abilities. and has been sent to this world as a miracle of divine power, the result of creation and wonder of divine art. Therefore, there have been opened two roads leading to either infinite ascent or infinite descent. The mystery of this awesome progress and decline of man for Nursi is contained in education. Therefore, it says everything, but it depends on education. Taallum ile tekamül etmek. It is through education human being can evolve to be a perfect human being. Then he defines man as someone who stands in need of most of varieties of beings in the universe and is connected to them, and whose needs spread through every part of the world, and his desires extend to eternity. So it is not difficult to see the overreaching implication of this definition, as it tacitly implies that any Islamic education, therefore, must address both to this transient world and the next world, which Nursi regards as one, the main and foundational concept of the Quran. Because, in many Muslim countries, just to know, they are changing their education system just to they want to provide an education. The students can easily find a job on the market. So the demands of the market, you can understand this as a global market or capitalist market, is you just educating young people to find a job in the system, who never try to understand the system, who never try to understand who is he. It's just he's a tool in the system to find a job, for this to have a good job, to have a livelihood in this world. But I don't want Islamic education neglects this world. But Nursi and also Imam Ghazali emphasize the same thing. The first principle of Islamic knowledge, any Islamic education and knowledge, is the knowledge of Allah, belief in Allah, knowledge of Allah, and then love of Allah, then to establish all his or her relations on this basis. Iman billah, marifatullah, and muhabbatullah. And these must be pillars of the tajid pillars of an Islamic education. So Nursi articulates at very early stage of his intellectual development that there are four aims of the Quran. When we owe Maqasidul Sharia to Imam Ghazali, and then all the way to Shatibi, but Nursi, although he says Imam Ghazali is one of my mentors, spiritual masters or mentors, he used the term Maqasidul Quran, not Maqasidul Sharia, Maqasid Quran. He just go to the Quran, and he says, there are four aims of the Quran: existence and oneness of the creator, a creator. This is Tawheed. Iman billah also. Messengers and the institution of the revelation, Nubuwah. The phenomenon of recreation, which includes human accountability, hashr or resurrection. Ghazali has a big problem with Ibn Sina and Farabi on this matter. And justice, adala, a concept which has moral and legal implications based on religion. So an Islamic education cannot ignore the implication of this understanding for the development of a spiritual and mental life of students. Here I emphasize the nation state mentality and how its impact, its impacts enduring in many societies in the Muslim world. And one of the best examples is my own country, Turkey. Still, we are discussing every day what gonna be our education system. There are some people intellectuals in Turkey. They are trying to just initiate the Western style education system. It will be solve all problems. And there are also some Muslims, they're trying to they say, we have a great legacy, we have a great history, we don't need any Western ideas. But and it is, still fight is going on. In fact, the founders of the modern Turkey, they invited John Dewey in 1924, in the summer of 1924, and to observe and see the plight of the country just established. It is, from the ashes of the Ottoman Empire, and suggest a new education system which may help to reconstruct the country and lead her to take its place in the race among the civilized world. That is the West, of course. Therefore, any Islamic education should keep the legacy of realities of nation mentality, and then propose a new comprehensive education project which aims to nurture and develop children's God-given abilities and equip them with the creative and critical skills and education. Of course, John Dewey made very smart and intelligent advices to the founders of the modern Turkey, but they didn't apply them because they have a nation-state mentality. They need they don't need critical or inquisitive students or citizens. They just want to create a new community, a new student, a new young youth who can, pursue in what they have been taught, and to go in the one direction. And this is one of the major problems we are still trying to overcome. So I give all this, then I said an Islamic education must be based on the Quranic worldview or Islamic worldview. What I mean by this, I also try to explain in my paper. Then I said, any Islamic knowledge theory must, start with the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet, because as the Prophet was a living Quran, he was a living example of how, for Muslims. And there's a lot of, although I try to summarize them from Muhammad Hamidullah's, very seminal study on the education system in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and all verses I just point them how to kindle a spirit for learning, for the study of nature, for the study of universe, for the study of ancient traditions, and more importantly about about the role of to be critical. And here I think the role model is Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam, presented us how to be a creative mind. I will give this later. Then I choose, I decided to just present Ghazali as a pioneer of Muslim critical thinking. This is for two reasons. Even, when I studied on Ghazali, when I was using his Munquzum min ad-Dalal in my classical thinking classroom, especially the translation by McCarthy in 1980, even McCarthy, when he wrote, I think, to my best knowledge, I don't know what Ed or some other colleagues they will say, he wrote the longest introduction to Munquzum min ad-Dalal, almost 40 pages, or maybe more than 40 pages. And there he says, how Imam Ghazali's Ihya, the revival of religious sciences, also make a revival in himself. It is just, what I understand by a creative and critical thinking. And he says, the McCarthy says in the introduction to Munquz, Deliverance from Error, I have to some extent found, and I believe others can find in the words an example of Ghazali, a true ihya. It means quickening, revivification, bringing back to life, causing to live. An ihya from the dark, that coldness of atheism, or more accurately, we taught godness. An ihya from everything, debilitating and crippling sinfulness, and ihya from lifeless and spiritless intellectualism, and ihya from the stupidity and listlessness and uncaring of social and moral mediocrity. You see, when I reflect on the concepts of creative and critical thinking and what McCarthy is saying, then I realized how Ghazali is important for us to rekindle a spirit of creative and critical thinking. You know, then reading this and reflect on educational curricula in use in Muslim societies, it is not difficult to discover that Ghazali and other pioneers of critical thinking were distant figures for us to be a source of motivation for creative and critical thinking. We couldn't bring them to the present day because we leave them to the imams in the mosque and also to preachers in the masjids, but we couldn't bring them to a modern classroom. Personally, Ghazali also had a great influence and awakening on me and shaped my Islamic identity from an early age with his book Bidayatul Hidayah, The Beginning of Guidance, a small work which captures the essence of Ihya. It was one of the first Islamic books I bought with my pocket money, which I earned at the end of the day as a child laborer. I was working when I was in middle school. I was working, you know, for pocket money at the as an instruction company, and as I was saving money to buy books. And the first book I bought by my pocket money was this Bidayatul Hidayah. And when I began to read the book, he began to change my psyche, my perception. He began to organize my 24 hours. From I wake up to the time when I go to the sleep, began to be, you know, organized according to this book. Later, of course, you know, I discovered the legacy of Ghazali. And, you know, the best example of Ghazali I use in my classroom on critical thinking is, you know, Ghazali was ready to delve into depth of, you know, let me say, you know, Hocam, how much time I have? Alparslan Hocam?
You have 10 more minutes.
Okay, I just, it will be enough for me, you know.
Okay, good.
Okay. You know, Ghazali reveals in his autobiography, Al-Munqidh min ad-Dalal, that he was burning for learning when he was a teenager and made a roadmap for himself and sticks to it throughout his life. Even he was a teenager. In fact, one reason for the great respect in Islamic and Western scholarship for Ghazali may be a result of this vigor and working program, which reminds us the Socratic motto, follow the argument where it leads, which has exerted a powerful impact throughout the history of Western philosophy. It seems it engaged with great minds such as Aristotle, Farabi, and Ibn Sina with this toolkit. And that is he developed skills to solve problems, cognitive ability, critical reasoning, confidence to engage great minds, and at the end generate new and alternative solutions to the problems under discussion. In other words, he read their books himself with a critical mind and reached to totally different conclusion with a creative spirit. See, but his method is amazing, you know. Still at the university level, as I said, you know, all students, they don't have self-confidence. Ghazali says in his autobiography, you know, he made his toolkit with these principles. I would penetrate far into every murky mystery, pounce upon every problem, and dash into every mazy difficulty. I would scrutinize the creed of every sect and seek to lay bare the secrets of each faction's teaching with the aim of discriminating between the proponent of truth and advocate of the error, and between the faithful follower of tradition and the heterodox innovator. I would never take leave of interiorist batiniya without wanting to learn about his interiorism, or of a literalist without wanting to know the substance of his literalism, zahiriya, or of a philosopher without seeking to become acquainted with the essence of his philosophy. This is the originality of Ghazali's critical mind. He self-educated himself about, as far as we know, about the major sources of philosophers, books of Farabi, especially books of Ibn Sina and also Aristotle and others. He self-educated them. As I will say, I also, presented in my paper in his Tahafutul Falasifa, Incoherence of Philosophers. He developed amazing arguments how to criticize them. This is, I think, the important part we can learn from Ghazali's critical legacy, just let all students, a spirit of researching and learning, as Ghazali says, of a philosopher without seeking to become acquainted with the essence of his philosophy, or of a mutakallim without endeavoring to discover the aim of his discussion and polemic, and of a Sufi without eagerly trying to obtain knowledge of the secret of his serenity, or of a devout worshipper without looking into the source and substance of his piety, or of an irreligious nihilist without attempting to find out his background and motivation in order to become aware of the reasons for his bold profession of nihilism and irreligion. I think Nietzsche would be happy to meet Ghazali and discuss with him. Ghazali was ready even to try to understand, try to listen anyone and then he will refute or accept based on arguments. So it is not difficult to detect in Ghazali's thinking and his approach to the problems he confronts during his education, both features of creative and critical thinking with the psychological and philosophical overtones. As he states, the thirst for grasping the real meaning of things was a habit from an early age in the prime of my life, Ghazali says. In fact, the Quran presents us in the personality of the Prophet Ibrahim, a critical mind who did not follow the tradition and attitudes of his father and his society, and criticized and refuted them on rational grounds. Saying this, it would be not difficult to infer that we cannot expect from our students to accept and believe whatever their teachers present to them. As you know, Ibrahim alayhi salam asked Allah how he will create the dead, and the God, Allah says, Ibrahim, you don't believe it? He said, of course I believe, but I want to, to satisfy my heart, to satisfy my mind. So we have to provide satisfactory answers to all students' questions in the classroom about anything, you see. So and also, as I said, I also summarized the Ghazali's approach in the Tahafut al-Falasifa, and I came to the conclusion that when trying to revise and reform our perception and programs of education for our children, we should not forget the impact of nation-state mentality, which employed education as an instrument in the modernization process of societies, and therefore sometimes initiated and followed the Western model of education as the only alternative. The makers of nation-state were in urgent need of modernizing their societies and solving short-term problems challenging them. Consequently, this new approach resulted in the eclipse and even that of traditional education system, and sometimes it was forbidden by state and a westernization policy imposed on Muslims in the name of catching up with the West. Therefore, today we must dig deeper to understand our problems and then articulate creative responses based on the core values of the Quran for their solutions with a creative and critical mind. I hope it may be clear that with creativity, I mean the psychology of self-confidence to investigate, research, and understand everything we have taught and trained at home, school, and society, as Ghazali accomplished in his day, and then come up with new solution based on the Quranic value system. This is, this is here, the students is at the center, but, I remember my, my high schools and primary school and middle school, and still it is still the same mentality in the Muslim countries and societies. Teachers is there, they are the source of everything, the source of the classroom. They are giving everything to students, and they're directing they are even, shaping their futures. But here, no. The first thing is the self-confidence. We have to give students self-confidence to investigate, to research, and understand everything we have taught and trained them at home, at school, and society. You see, they can be critical of anything. So then they will come with their own answers. So the goal, the aim and goal of education would not be limited to with a market-driven framework, but a higher and loftier aim which uplifts us in the pursuit of learning, as the Prophet himself asked from God, "Oh, my sustainer, cause me to grow in knowledge. Rabbi zidna ilman." As Muhammad Asad underlines boldly, although it is very probable that, as most of the classical commentaries point out, this exhortation was in the first instance addressed to the Prophet Muhammad, there is no doubt it applies to every person at all times who reads the Quran. This is the gist of this paper. The critical spirit in the Quran, we need to transmit this spirit in today's classrooms. When we find in the personality of the Prophet himself a spirit of learning for everything around him, as he keeps saying, he keeps praying, "My Lord, show me the reality of all things as it really is." Yani erini haqaiq el-ashya kama hiya. Who the Prophet who is receiving the revelation, the wahi from Allah, he's praying Allah to show him the reality of things as it is really is. How we can do this without scientific investigation, without a critical, mind to study universe, to study everything? This prayer of the Prophet has echoed throughout the Muslim history in many forms, but perhaps its most eloquent expressions is by the 10th, 16th century, Persian Sufi poet and scholar Abdurrahman Jami, who thus prayed to God, "O God, deliver us from the preoccupation with worldly vanities and show us the nature of things as they really are. Remove from our eyes the veil of ignorance and show us things as they really are." Today, let me finish with this. We need to rekindle this spirit with the experiences from legacy of Islamic learning in the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom on the one hand, and the findings of scientific studies regarding human nature, as well as how we learn on the other hand. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. This was a very good talk concerning our problems. At the moment, I can see only one comment and question by Dr. Fariskaya. So let me formulate it briefly. He is saying that I wonder if Nusi's approach he employed, as you know, in the well-known Sincerity Risale Ikhlas, Risale could be included in your discussion also. As he says, for instance, the power of unity when two people come together is only, it's not only, if you come one, it's only one. But when you come with someone else helping you, it's not 1 plus 1, but it is 1 next to 1 that makes 11. So this is the way it is said. So, and then I suppose he's saying, you know, that in the Quran, he's referring to the verse that says, Al-Arabu, you know, in the grammatical, although Arab is masculine, but the Quran is using the feminine verb for the masculine. So he says, because the Quran wants to, you know, indicate something about this.
Yeah.
And then there are such things mentioned in the Risala that are very much signs of critical thinking, and that they show very much originality. How could these be interpreted from your approach?
I think it is very good comments and feedbacks. You know, as I said, you know, in my paper, I just I gave more space to that. When I understand from the critical and creative thinking is also to give new meanings to the words, to the concepts, to coin new concepts. And in this respect, Nursi is very rich, Ghazali is very rich. You know, they just don't understand the concept as we understand it. They just coin a new concept. They provide new meanings. This is let me say their hermeneutical system is, you know, is very rich in this respect. This is why I just emphasized nation state mentality, because in nation state mentality everything is coined by the state. You cannot get out of this in your life. Even you are a professor, you still have the impact of this, you know, mentality with you. It is not to change it. This is why I think these great thinkers from Socrates to Said Nursi, they also seen as a threat to the society, to the establishment, because they just was poor people, but they have a strong ideas. They have strong, concept which can transform a society, which can transform a youth. This is why the major argument against the Socrates in ancient Greece, you know, they said, you are shaking the foundation of society. But he said, I am a poor man. Okay, thank you for this. What else, Hocam? I think.
Yunus Hocam, you have a question. You please go ahead. Then after that, Edward has another question.
Yes, thank you very much, Ibrahim. I think it was a beautiful presentation of a very important topic, critical thinking, very important, because Nursi also says that the main difference between animals and humans is the free will. That is, if you take the free will away by oppression, then you turn humans into animals, kind of not being able to do anything there. And the World Economic Forum, they did a survey about the most important skills in this age of knowledge, the new industrial age, industry 4.0, whatever. Yeah. And they listed the top 10 skills. And the number one skill needed in this age is critical thinking. That is, the whole world sees the importance of the critical thinking here. And of course, for it to work, you need freedom. That is, if let's say you don't have freedom, then how can you think critically? You will get in trouble. So I think with oppression comes really the cancellation of critical thinking. Because if you don't think, if you don't express yourself, then you are safe. So the freedom of expression, when it is suppressed, again, we have the problems here. And if you somehow question the authority, telling you what is right and wrong, saying that, can it be, let's say, better this way? Again, you are labeled as a rebel and as an undesirable, as a dangerous person. And in that, culture, in that environment, we have, again, difficulties there. And in this age, we concentrate on acquiring knowledge, but it is not acquiring knowledge, it is really creating knowledge. and you cannot create new knowledge unless you think critically and creatively. So if, let's say, you want to advance in this age, critical thinking and creativity, imagination, I think these are at the forefront there. And it is also a matter of culture. That is, the question I'll ask you is critical thinking something teachable, or is it, a cultural thing? Can you let's open a class and teach it so that people acquire this skill, or is it somehow gained somehow? Because in the West, I don't see, common courses on critical thinking. It is a way of life. That is, you do the istishare, you encourage people to express themselves, the freedom of expression, you value the opinions, and the culture kind of, instills that. That is, we don't take a, course on critical thinking. So can this be achieved in, let's say, by teaching a course? Same goes with ethics, of course. And also, Nursi emphasized the muqtazai hal and defines, belagat as muqtazai hal, that is compliance with the situation at hand. And this requires, critical thinking. That is, the answer can be right or wrong, depending on the situation. Once, Einstein asked a question while he was teaching. He gave to the assistant saying that we'll ask this question. And then the assistant said, sir, we asked this question last year, so people know the answer. Are you sure you want to ask the same question again? And Einstein says, yes, the question is the same, but the answer has changed. That is, unless, let's say, you critically think these things, obviously you don't get that depth there. But if, let's say, you have the suppression, oppression in a country, in a family, in a culture, in that environment, how can you teach critical thinking? I think a lot of questions for you. Thank you very much.
I don't think they're all questions. There are also a lot of comments and feedbacks to make my points better to be understood. I think this is the reality I am facing in my classes. During I am teaching critical thinking, and yes, there is a part. There is a part in family. In family, they never ask to say their own views. What do you think about this? It is father or mother, parents. They are deciding what is good, what is bad. Even where you will vote in the election, they will tell you which party to vote. Even when I was in Finland, I just observed I tried to observe very carefully the interaction of children with their parents, and then I realized it starts from the family. Because from the very early age, they ask the opinion of their children. What do you think? What would you like to drink? What would you like to eat? Do you prefer
Islamic.
this? Yes. Do you prefer this color or this color? You see. But this is why I said, we have. This is why I try to underline the impact of nation state. Although I discovered a lot of studies on this concept. And it is still, it is also a part of our culture. I also accept this, but there is also a role of education. I still am hopeful about the education can make a difference. And the human being, as a human being, we are in the process of evolving through education. تعلم لتكمل. It is, perfecting ourselves through education. And this can be done through a creative and critical thinking. And if we, I'm trying to disseminate it in the society. And after we providing this course at Üsküdar University, now I heard some other universities also, they are giving, critical thinking courses, maybe in the future. And there will be more teachings on this. And look, the ATS book is one of the first on the subject. One is Mumtaz Ahmed from Malaysia, I think. And this is, but when you look at that, and Amazon.com, there's a lot of books in English, textbooks, how to teach critical thinking in the classroom, in the colleges, at the universities. But when it comes how we teach in all universities, there is no book written by a Muslim scholar yet, unfortunately. So I think it's gonna be a part of our education system, and by the time it will take time, but I think we have to make this critical step towards critical and creative thinking. And there is a question from Ed. Ed, you can make also you can make comments if you like, but Ed, I think Ihya is just is not utilized from a pedagogical perspective. As I am reading Ihya from anew, I just realized how stereotypes or how my mind was close to some subtle messages of Ghazali just put in the text, some new, when he was traveling from Baghdad to Damascus, he just told us about a story about the ant and pen. He said, oh my God, I am just like an ant, because when he was writing something, he saw an ant is looking at the ink, the pen, and also the paper. He said to himself, this ant does not see myself, who is writing. Oh my God, I never realized to see how the pen of God, who is in the universe, to see the pen of God, the hand of God, who is behind all of these changes. So his presentation of the universe in Ihya, and then in Jawahir al-Quran, and then in some other books is amazing. It is totally different from his teaching, when he was a rector in Baghdad. So I think, maybe you and some Yunus and we all have the obligation to discover the Islamic legacy, to introduce this to all young students with a new mentality. Then they can look at the universe, they can discover the universe and also themselves. Then they still can be good engineers, good doctors, good physicians, whatever, but with the Islamic values, with an Islamic perspective, with a spirit of learning, burning for learning. I am just disappointed when I meet some people. I just make a quick, ask some intelligent questions. When I saw my professor is not having reading books for 10 years, 5 years, I just keep the or talk short. You see, he said, I become professor, I don't need to read something. But look at Al-Bastan in his library. When I visited Yunus in his home, it is like he's in retreat to just study more, produce more, think, to create an atmosphere for deeper thinking. So I think we have to give this spirit to our young people. This is why I am trying to do in this article. And if I couldn't read all these messages here. If yes, Hocam.
Mine is not a question, that was just general comment for everybody, but Brother Nasir, he has a very good question referring to our Prophet ﷺ's prayer.
Yeah.
Oh God, increase me in knowledge.
Yeah.
You think, can we interpret this as increase me in critical thinking? Can we do like that?
Sure. Let me give you an example I used in my classrooms, and my students, they are all surprised. When in the war of trench, in the trench defense, and the Handak, the war of the Handak, what Prophet did, he said, there was more than 10,000 soldiers of Meccan and also all tribes and also Jewish. They combined their forces to spell out, to destroy Islam to destroy Islam on the face of the earth. And the Prophet ﷺ took the message. What he did, he said, don't worry, because the Quran in Ahzab says, the Muslim community were so concerned, was so afraid, they just, they was, at the wake of to be or not to be. But the Prophet didn't say to them, don't worry, no, I will have revelation from Allah. He will show us the solution. Then we will get rid of these enemies. But it said, let's make an istishara, consultation. And even today, look, the major problem in the Middle East is with Iran, Arabs and Iran, Gulf states with Iran, and Turkey with Iran. We are not accepting Iran still like a true partner, a true brother. But at that time, there was only different, a critical, I mean, a different and creative suggestion from Salman Farisi, from the Salman from Persia. And the Prophet was so humble to listen to him and to apply whatever he told them immediately, without questioning. It was a good idea. So I think the Prophet here is showing us how to solve a problem, how to find a solution, how to give, to praise our friends, how to look at our friends, our colleagues who's working with us. Maybe his education is not like us, just to be humble. Although if the Prophet is so humble to listen and also to put in force as soon as Salman finished his words, and he was in the digging the trench himself, then I think I can give you also examples from the life of the Prophet, other examples. But we didn't look at these examples as an example of critical or creative thinking. We just see, we look at the, other dimension of the problem.
While you try to read, Sister Tubanur has a question, Dr. Tubanur. While you read that in the chat box, I will give a chance to Edward, because I know he worked on this subject. Maybe he can make more comments. I see his comments in the chat box also.
Yeah, I agree with Tuba. This is the one of the major proposition of my one of my argument. We have to give the self-confidence to the students from the start to ask questions, to go after the truth, as Ghazali did. When Ghazali arrived at the Nishabur, he was almost 13 or 14 years, but he has a toolkit how to study, how to understand the many divergent currents in the Muslim society of that time. He has a very good toolkit for him how to read other books. So our education system, this is why I'm saying the nation state mentality was just narrowed our perspective to question, to ask different questions, and to dare to find new solutions. As Yunus said, it is sometimes dangerous. I am aware of that.
Yes, Dr. Edward.
Yes, Ed.
I'm better at writing than I am at speaking, so I was just writing the comment.
Okay.
And I'll just finish it here, and then I'm basically saying that yeah, I'll just speak, I guess. I agree with a lot of what was said so far. I just think that there's something missing, and I understand why we're missing it, because it's something that we all share, and it's obvious for us all. But the fact is, that well, I guess I think that in as much as we talk about critical thinking from a specifically an Islamic point of view, I wouldn't limit it to just Muslims, but I would say that what's an essential feature of the way I think Islam or a Muslim should see critical thinking is that it should be, the purpose of it is to ascertain the truth of things, right? And there are different ways that you can understand critical thinking based on what you think the main purpose of it is. And so how we measure the success or the criticalness of the thinking is one way to put it. And I think that for Muslims, truth is going to be the measure, because the purpose of thinking is to ascertain the truth. But in a kind of a capitalist society, for example, maybe it's pragmatism, and basically technology or finding technical solutions to the problem is the main purpose of thinking, right? Or in a kind of a European style liberal society, just creativity for its own sake or being free. And so in that case, the freedom of the thinking will be the measure of its criticalness, right? Now, it is completely true. I completely agree with you. And the longer I'm living here in the Muslim world, the more convinced I've become that we really are suffering under kind of long centuries developed cultures of real oppression and, you know, injustice, right? In this way. And intrinsically, it's an injustice. And secondly, it's true that it does stifle freedom of thought. And I agree that freedom of thought is a necessary condition for critical thinking. But the fact is that all of the countries which have the most freedom of thought, which we're looking at as models, are the countries where atheism is the dominant way of life, and it's almost an inescapable, you know, it is the sort of structure, the very structure of the thinking of the countries. Atheism is so strong there. And so if God is true, and if critical thinking is, you know, measured by truth, you know, and not just freedom, then I guess I would not say that, I don't think that we could say that these Western countries are models of critical thinking. Just because they allow people to express their opinion, and just because they allow, you know, and they have free discussion and stuff, doesn't really make them models of critical thinking. And precisely for the reason that it's so easy for them to have free discussion. And that's because they don't believe in truth. And that's why it doesn't really matter so much what people say. That's why it's so easy for them to have this kind of, allow this kind of freedom. So if we're talking about, you know, using Ghazali as an example, I think we have to really be careful to distinguish his conception of critical thinking from what we find in Western countries, you know, and the fact that Muslim countries are suffering under oppression and are not free and should be free doesn't mean that the countries that are free are models for critical thinking in that sense. They're models perhaps for freedom, right? But and that's not to say that freedom will lead to atheism or falsehood, right? So but I think that it means, it shows that we would have to, as long as we do think that critical thinking is thinking that leads to the truth, right? If it is done correctly, and if we think that God is true, then we can't really believe that Western countries are actually doing critical thinking properly. Yeah. And I think that we should look at Ghazali as a sort of corrective. I mean, I totally agree with you using Ghazali as a model. I can't think of a better one, but it should also show us the difference between that. And I think that's why I asked the thing here, because I think it seems to me that Ghazali was kind of like the philosopher, and not taking it as, taking it for granted that everybody's equally capable of critical thinking. You know, as you, I think, were saying, he wrote his Ihya for not as a pedagogical guide to like set up schools for, because he actually knew not everybody in society could, and not everybody in society should be expected to follow this, you know, kind of specially unique path that he was laying out with the Ihya Ulumuddin. And so, yeah, anyway, that's so however, whatever follows from that, that was just my thought. Sorry for taking so long.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I agree with you. You know, this is, I just talking, you know, about the how to higher education, and also at or teacher education, how we have to revise or devise or new curricula, you know, and it means a lot of problems or a lot of headaches. But what is interesting, you know, the Ghazali's self-confidence when he is writing Takhafut Falasife, he is doing just to his you know, opponents. He gives enough space to them. He even today, you know, we are living in a post-truth era. So, but when look at the Ghazali, he is very honest when he's dealing with his opponents. So first thing I think we have to give our students, it is self-confidence. And Ghazali, and as Najati says, yes, to be Abdullah, to be slave of Allah, but with our free choice, not as imposed on us by our family or by state. Ghazali asked this. I quoted it in my paper, but I just didn't mention here. He said, why I am a Muslim? Why I am not a Christian? If I was born in a Christian or Jewish family, what was if I will still choose to be Muslim? You see, this is a rare in the Islamic history to ask such a question to himself or herself. So it again means, you know, his confidence about the truth of Islam, about this is why I think has no problem with the foundational values. But and he has also self-confidence if we teach or if we present the spirit of Quran, the message of the Quran properly. We thought, you know, this is why he's criticizing the Aristotelian mentality, the impact of Aristotelian mentality on Ibn Sina and Farabi. He says on metaphysical issues, you know, the limit of the reason, the limit of aql is known. So we have to rely on revelation, on the Quranic teachings. Why you are neglecting the Quran and you are preferring, you know, you are using the Aristotelian logic or Aristotelian reason to solve the metaphysical problems? And he was right, because Immanuel Kant also is just like Kant, he says there is a limit to the reason on the epistemological basis. So, you know, when I don't I'm not saying there is all solutions is there in the Ihya or other places. We have to understand our legacy with a new spirit for learning, with spirit of for the truth. In our case, I agree. Of course, in the West it is totally different. It is a different, you know, situation. But if we have self-confident and knowledgeable and young people who are respect knowledge, who are trying to learn more, it will also be good for the Western societies. Because I just also see, if we don't teach this mentality to young children, they are easily manipulated by radical groups.
Dr. Firdaus, I saw your hand one time raised. Would you like to ask your question or comment? Yeah, Dr. Firdaus, I think in any case, now we have some more questions in the chat box. There is a long quotation, I think, by, again, Dr. Tuba Nur. And then I saw, Dr. Mustafa, would you like to ask your question, or you want to read your comment?
Hello?
Yes, Dr. Firdaus.
Oh, okay. Hello?
Yes.
I think, first of all, let me congratulate you, because you are from last couple of days. I'm really happy to see you people on this, to the mode of this Zoom, that we are learning a lot about critical thinking and many issues. Last time you have discussed it. So, but this time I'm a little bit confused, because so far what I have learned from many things from being I'm first of all, I'm a Muslim, but living in a Muslim society dominated by Muslim people around me. But often and on, I heard from Maulanas, from people who know the basic, at least the basic knowledge of the Quran. But that when you say people that everything is absolute, there is no space for criticism. There is no space for what your mind, because you say that many things in Quran, many things in Hadith are absolute. So how come it is possible to ignite the people? How come it is possible to develop critical thinking in such societies where people come up with this, where people have always thought this is final? There is no space for anything to add. There is no space for anything to. There is no space at all. So in that setup, so that's why how I see that when it's all, it's not just, you cannot isolate it from society, you cannot isolate it from culture, as someone already has discussed it here. So being a follower of Muslim, being a follower of Islam, I see that there are people who say that finality is there, you cannot add it, you can make compromise on certain things. So when you come up with the same these things, I don't think there is possibility for developing critical thinking in Islam. So this is how I see it.
Thank you, Doctor. Yes, and yes, this is why this book will be published in the Europe, in the West. Because, if you say, there were some people, they say, I lost one of my friends because of COVID-19, because he didn't believe in the COVID. When he realized it is COVID, it was too late. You see, there are some people, he was a professor. He said, no, every year I have a flu. It is just a flu, and they are exaggerating the problem. I don't believe there is a virus. It is a pandemic, So he just, lost his life with this misunderstanding. So we have a lot of problems in the Muslim world, as I told you. If you can say we don't have problems, but still the problems over there. Who will solve this problem? Young people who don't have self-confidence, who don't have a critical mentality to how to solve these problems, to find solutions. Then they will go, as see, all the humanity today, they are looking to the Western countries, even China, for vaccine. So far, there is almost 60 Muslim countries. Nobody is developing or providing a vaccine to the humanity. This is a shame for Muslims when we look at our legacy, when we look at the history of Islamic learning and technology for centuries, But it is we have to feel our responsibility. Why our students, or even there is two scientists who discovered the biotech vaccine in Germany. They are from Turkey, but are totally educated in Germany. They are a product of German education system, not Turkish system. But we are still we are saying we're proud of them. They are Turks, but they are German citizens, and they are educated there. What I'm trying, we have to give a spirit for learning, for trying to understand, and which is not in conflict with their religious values. And we can do that, when we study our legacy. We have a lot of tools, we have a lot of materials. We can do that. Thank you.
That's actually when we remember the verse in the Quran that says La haraja fid din, that gives us the idea that even the Quran does not bound.
Nasrin, thank you very much for this. Intention, yes, it is. Intention is the cornerstone of everything. This is very, very important. I agree with that. I have no problem with that.
Okay, I guess my voice is not coming to you.
Ghazali himself said the society and religious scholars were corrupt. This is why he quitted his job. He left Baghdad, because he said, there was just a traditional religiosity. They just pleasing themselves. But in their real life, there was no place. They didn't look at the universe as a Muslim. This is why I said, when on his way from Baghdad to Damascus, whole his perception of universe began to evolve and change. Then he can see the power, the wisdom, the beauty, and the reflection of 99 names of God in the nature. This is why during these 11 years, he never accepted any invitation by the government or by rich people. He just chose a very humble life to discover all these values, the truth in the universe. This is why I think he himself understood he's a mujaddid, and he named his book as Ihya Ulumuddin. Yes.
Okay, our time is up. I think it's finished. I would like to thank to everybody.
Or you can make comments. Okay, Mustafa, would you like to say something? And Najati, yes, I agree with you. The divine names, the diversity of divine names is implication for the plurality in society, but still in the practice, unfortunately, Muslims, they don't like different opinions.
Okay, thank you very much. I think our time is up. It is already over 90 minutes of time we said.
I couldn't hear you, unfortunately, Hocam. I couldn't hear you.
You cannot hear me now?
No, I can hear you now. Right, okay. Please,
okay, let me see if there is. Okay, I think, I don't know if Dr. Mustafa, he still wants to ask his question. That will be the final one, and then we'll finish.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. It's up to you. If we have to finish, it's fine. But
Okay.
if you will let me, it's in part question, part comment. It's just that, you know, Ustad says somewhere that where there is a need for generalization, specification might be a problem, and where there is need for specification, generalization might be a problem. When we talk about nation states, this institution that has been shaping human society since, you know, for about 2 centuries now, the lack of critical thinking becomes a problem. But, you know, I've been living in America in institutions of academic research for almost 20 years now. And in contexts like this, critical thinking or the abuse of critical thinking might become a problem, partly because of the way that these institutions are set. If you want to prove yourself, if you want to publish an article, if you want to publish a book, you have to say that, you know, somebody or people before you were all wrong and you now saw the light and you have the right thing to say. And that might not be the right way to go either. So I just wanted to draw attention to the two extremes that might shape our thoughts and practices in this relation. One is the lack of critical thinking altogether, right? You take whatever is given to you, and that would be taqlid, imitation, and you know, it is very problematic in the age that we live. But another would be, you know, tafrit of this, going to the extreme of abusing critical thinking to aggrandize the self, to put ourselves at the center and make ourselves as the standard. And I think what Ed was saying, that, you know, critical thinking needs to be the instrument of a search for truth, right? That is probably what we have to keep in mind all the time, and to make it not a search for self-aggrandizement. So that's a comment, probably not a question. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. It is a very good comment. I just, you know, I also sometimes when they ask me to give talks, I just have the same concerns, and also, but I think, you know, we have to face this challenge, and with just like Ghazali, when he was wrestling with Aristotle, when he says in the in the introduction of Tahafut, incoherence of philosophers, it is really amazing, you know. You see, he was so self-confident, who can defeat them on the philosophical terms. So I think we have to give this self-confidence to our students. They can make a change. They can devise a new solution. They can come up with a new answer, but based on Quranic values. This is why I emphasize the Quranic values or the Quranic worldview. And I just try to make it clear in my paper. I give some more space to what I understand by Islamic Quranic worldview and what is the core values of the Quran, and we cannot neglect them, because this is what makes us different as a Muslims. But on the other side, there's a lot of people, they just want to try blindly. They try obedience from us or from anyone. They say don't criticize. Critique is not good. That's obey. But you see, but like in the Ghazali, we find out that he was just not, you know, just try to understand everything, then to come up and based on arguments, based on burhan or delil or whatever you want. Yes, thank you very much, Hocam. If there is anything else, I can answer.
Well, there are some just comments, you know, I think everybody they already read. in the chat box, unless if somebody raises hand that, you know, want to read also personally, I will check to see if any hands. So far, there is no more hands, I think. So I would like to thank again. You probably read in the chat box, I said this is the end of our lecture, seminars, webinar series for the fall semester. Inshallah, we will continue next semester, starting on March 7th. That is also Sunday. If you have comments, you know, suggestions that, you know, it should start at this time, it should be like this, the way it should be conducted and so on, you're most welcome.